Has turned violent in Romania as hundreds of thousands demonstrate against legislation that critics say will promote government corruption. The Guardian says the Wednesday, February 1st protests were the largest since the fall of communism in Romania in 1989. An estimated 300,000 people gathered in 50 towns and cities across the country. A small group of protesters clashed with police in Bucharest, the country's capital.
Protests on the streets of Bucharest turned violent overnight, as tens of thousands of Romanians cried out against corruption. A government decree has triggered the biggest demonstrations in the country since the fall of communism in 1989. The decree decriminalizes several graft offenses, and protesters want it repealed.
The Romanian Prime Minister says that he will now scrap a decree that would have shielded dozens of politicians from prosecution for corruption following 5 days of mass protests in the country.
Tomorrow there will be an emergency government meeting to repeal this decree. I do not want to divide Romania. It cannot be cut in half.
Sorin Grindeanu made the announcement in a televised speech. Despite the statement, nearly 170,000 anti-corruption protesters held a rally outside his office in the capital, Bucharest, calling on him to resign. Demonstrations were held in other major cities throughout the country. Now, under the planned law, a financial wrongdoing would only be punishable by jail if it exceeds over $47,000 US. Now, protesters see the new measure as a retreat by the government on widespread anti-corruption campaign.
South Korean protesters gathered in Seoul to demand President Park Geun-hye's immediate resignation. They were also demanding the Constitutional Court speed up the hearing process of Park's impeachment case. Organizers say more than 2,000 non-governmental organizations took part in the candlelight rally on Saturday night. Prosecutors want to question Park and search the presidential Blue House for more information about events that led to her impeachment.
And riot police used tear gas and stun grenades to prevent the crowd from gathering outside the parliament. The demonstrations took place while lawmakers were discussing austerity measures to tackle a deepening financial crisis in the state. The fiscal crisis comes just months after the state's signature city of Rio de Janeiro hosted the 2016 Olympics. Thousands of state employees have not been paid or have been paid months late.
Jewish settlers occupied this land 20 years ago. In 2014, Israel's High Court ruled the 40 families in Amona are living here illegally. The land belongs to Palestinians. Several of the families living on the hilltop opted to go without a fight. Others, joined by hundreds of settlers from neighboring areas who traveled to the hilltop to show solidarity, defied the court order and confronted the police forces sent to evacuate the outpost.
This is a war over the land, a war of values. Where are you? Where are you? You are the nation of Israel. Stand with us. Turn things upside down. Refuse orders. Be men.
Both sides are advocating nonviolence, but as the forces move in, surround, and come into this community, we're seeing more arrests, more altercations, and the prediction is that the situation here is bound to escalate.
Which it did as the day progressed and forced evacuations ensued. Multiple settlers were arrested and more than a dozen police operatives were injured as the operation carried on into the night. There are approximately 100 illegal outposts in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Amona is the biggest, sitting on 600,000 square meters of land. The court deadline for settlers to be off the land and for all structures to be demolished.
A young man's body lies in a pool of blood in one of Manila's poorest neighborhoods. It's a scene that has been played out thousands of times during Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs. But this killing came a day after police were ordered to stop all anti-drug operations that have left thousands of people dead. The victim's mother says her son, Aldrente Guzman, had no enemies, but had used drugs in the past.
He had a lot of dreams for his children, to give them a good education and have a better life because he wasn't able to finish school himself. But how can he give them a good life now that he's gone because of these killings?
In a recent report, Amnesty International accuses the country's police of carrying out more than 7,000 extrajudicial killings.
Southern Madagascar, food and water are scarce. This is the third year in a row the region has faced shortages of water and crop failures. Many people are hungry and some are starving. Some people are selling their farming tools and livestock just to get some cash to buy the food they need now.
At best, we get 1 cup of rice, which is used for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If we do not get the 1 cup of rice, the adults stay hungry.
And some families who have nothing to sell are surviving by eating wild fruit.
We don't have anything to eat but leaves and red cactus fruit. There's nothing else to eat.
To escape the hardship, thousands of people have fled to cities, including the capital, Antananarivo.
Hunger level in some parts of the country are so high that about 500,000 people are facing severe malnutrition. Health agencies are warning that things could get worse without urgent assistance.
Food that's been grown now won't be ready for harvest until March. With water so scarce, many people are having to walk for kilometers to get enough to drink, and the young are suffering the most.
There are a lot of children who are going through a very difficult time in terms of health, nutrition, and access to basic water.
Christians, we've talked about this overseas. Right. The refugee program that, or the refugee changes you're looking to make, as it relates to persecuted Christians, do you see them as kind of a priority here?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, they've been horribly treated. Do you know, if you were a Christian in Syria, it was impossible, at least very tough to get into the United States. If you were a Muslim, you could come in. But if you were a Christian, it was almost impossible. And the reason that was so unfair is that everybody was persecuted, in all fairness, but they were chopping off the heads of everybody, but more so the Christians. And I thought it was very unfair. So we are going to help them.
After Trump's statement, some evangelical Christians are divided as to whether or not Christian refugees should be given priority status. They say the act of putting one religion ahead of others sets a dangerous precedent. Others worry that expediting refugee entry for Christians will only lead to more persecution. But Representative Chris Smith, a Republican from New Jersey, disagrees. He says Christian refugees do need to be prioritized because they're in a more difficult position. As religious minorities, they don't feel safe in UN refugee camps, which means they don't have access to the refugee program.
When you have been targeted for genocide, the elimination, the evisceration of all of your people in whole or in part, simply because you happen to be Christian, that begs the question on how much we need to be doing, and that it's been non-existent. They also need, in my opinion, the ability to, if they can't go back to Mosul, for example, because it's just too dangerous and security is a big issue, the ability to get processed, get the interview to come to the United States. I mean, these Christian communities can be vetted easier than some because they know each other. They're with their pastor. They're with their faith community. They moved in mass and now are living in Erbil, most of them, 70,000. And it seems to me that some, and most of them, still want to go back to their homelands. But if some want to come here because, for the sake of their children, for example, they should at least get the interview and then begin the vetting process. Right now, they're not even getting the interview. They're not in the UNHCR camps, the UN camps. They're unwelcomed there.